So, Mike, theater experience, any memorable ones besides Memento?
Well, we've talked before about how big of a comic book fan is. So I think the only movie that I've seen of Nolan that I went to see because it's a Nolan movie is Inception.
Nice.
Right.
Interesting.
All of the others are because I love Batman and I want to see. I mean, I appreciate Chris Nolan and I appreciate what he did for something of which I'm a fan.
Mm-hmm.
But I went because it's a Batman movie and I would have gone no matter who directed it.
Right.
You know what I mean? I went
Right.
to Man of Steel even though Zack Snyder directed it. So I went to see Inception because it was Chris Nolan. I remember seeing the trailers and just saying, I have no idea what that's about, but I'm going to see it anyway.
Yeah.
And of course I was floored. I saw it with a girl that I was dating, and I dated briefly, and she didn't get a lot of it. I saw it with a friend and fellow nerd, and he and I were just laughing and appreciating every wow factor seen in the entire movie. So I left the movie with two overwhelming feelings. Holy crap, that was amazing, and holy crap, I gotta get out of this relationship.
That's awesome.
Thanks, Christopher.
Yeah. So up next is Batman Begins, the first of Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy, starring Christian Nolan. Wow, holy crap!
Starring Hank.
For our listeners, that was a reference to the Breaking Bad bonus episodes that you'll hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard. Okay. Starring Christian Bale, Michael Caine, Heath Ledger in one of them. This one features Liam Neeson, as well as Cillian Murphy.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's... I was blown away by this movie when I first saw it. I think you guys mentioned that you weren't, or Tiny mentioned he wasn't very excited about it when it came out, but I was the same way. Mm-hmm. But when I saw it, my theater experience was I was working in a movie theater and I went to go see it for free. And it was actually kind of funny because a coworker of mine was seeing it as well, and it was kind of awkward because it was like when I just met him. So I was like, we both went at the same time, and we went to the same showing, and then I was like, should I sit by him, or are we seeing this together?
Share popcorn.
Yeah.
Hands.
Yeah. And then to add to the awkwardness just a little bit, I actually had to give him a ride home, so it's kind of weird. But we both really liked it. And I mean, I was actually
The ride home or the movie?
I think he went on a date, Matt.
I think
Sounds like a date. That's what I'm saying.
it was weird. There was like a bouquet waiting for me, and I mean, I kept getting calls, and it was weird. It was weird.
You were done eating the popcorn, but he kept saying, "Dig deeper. The good stuff's at the bottom."
Oh, jeez, I could have made a very vulgar joke, but anyway, I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. It was not what I was expecting from a Batman movie. It was not what I was expecting from a superhero movie in general, or a comic book movie if you're a purist, since Batman's not technically a superhero.
Yeah,
but I mean, I loved it. I really did, and it was fantastic. What'd you guys think of it?
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's amazing. My introduction to it is kind of interesting for a couple of reasons. That summer, of course, in May 19th, Star Wars Episode 3 came out, and that's all I cared about that summer. It was like there was Star Wars Episode 3, and then college, and then like the Cubs were okay that year, and then Batman Begins. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was kind of initially, at least I think, and the way I took it as a senior in high school, was kind of, I'm sorry, I'm stuttering here. Initially, it was kind of introduced or advertised as a remake, kind of reboot, kind of they weren't clear on what it was, intentionally so. I have no doubt in my mind that it was intentionally so, that if you wanted to say this was a prequel to what came before, then that's fine. You can understand that. But if you want to say it's a remake, okay, that's actually a little more accurate, but it's up to you. They were very unclear intentionally. So I went in waiting for the score from the original movies, the Tim Burton movies, and it was a lot different than I thought it was going to be. I loved it, though. I mean, I loved the movie. The movie was fantastic.
Awesome.
Good. Tiny, you mentioned earlier about your experience with it, but how did you feel about the movie?
I also liked it a ton, and I think this movie was, Batman Begins was the first comic book movie that was treated or was accepted as an art form as opposed to just entertainment. And I think, there had been some good comic book films before that, the X-Men movies and Blade and stuff like that. But I think those were almost solely entertainment value, as opposed to artistic value. And I think this film, Batman Begins, really changed the general public's perception of how a comic book can be delivered and consumed as art, as opposed to just something you go see because you want to see a movie or you want to be entertained for an hour and a half. I think it was, again, not to over exemplify Nolan, but I think it was an important film as far as that goes, because it changed how people think about a comic book movie or a superhero movie.
Yep.
True.
And that was clearly present on the screen as you're watching it in the theater. That's how I felt about it when I watched it.
I agree. Yeah.
Am I the only one? Do you guys share? I connect a lot of how I watch movies or moments with movies with the score and the theme, particularly with the superheroes, because I want that to be like the song I hear in my head when I see a superhero come on the screen. So, there is so much Danny Elfman in the originals and even the animated series that theme is I associated that with Batman as much as Donna with Jaws. Really. And so when that didn't happen in Batman Begins, I had to force myself toward the end of the movie to say, listen, you're just not going to get it, because it's not going to be a big surprise moment where they get this song. Kind of like in the original Tim Burton, where the Batwing goes into the sky and looks like the signal because it's in the moon, and they played the theme. I was waiting for one of those moments and never got it, but I had to just kind of ignore that.
I did not have that experience whatsoever, because I was never really into Batman. I never really watched the original movies.
Gotcha.
But I will say that Hans Zimmer, he is just spectacular. His score for Inception is just on constant rotation on my iPod. I love it. He's fantastic. I actually think he should have been nominated for either The Dark Knight or Inception, or he should have won, because I think he was actually nominated for one of those. But I just think he's fantastic. If you listen to, this is dipping into Inception a little bit, but if you listen to his track Time, it's just phenomenal. It almost tells a story. And it's incredible. It's really fantastic, and that's present in Batman Begins as well.
Agreed. And to answer your question, Mike, I had a similar experience as far as that. What you mentioned about the music and stuff. I was kind of expecting a superhero moment like that, but I wasn't. I don't know. I guess I wasn't looking for it maybe as much as you were, but I thought that's what I thought it was going to be, that kind of movie, because that's what I expected from it.
Yeah.
But I was, just pleasantly surprised when it never came about, and when it totally changed. It totally found its own identity and became its own thing.
Well, and where did you guys stand on the idea that it could be a prequel, but it certainly wasn't? I honestly didn't decide that it wasn't a prequel until The Dark Knight came out.
Oh wow!
Oh, okay.
It was that long where I wasn't sure. And but I mean, for the most part, I was like, well, it's not really. It's a bad prequel because it doesn't have a whole lot to do with it. But they definitely did not confirm. I don't know. They were very wise to not confirm that it's something new altogether until The Dark Knight came out. I don't think.
Right. Well, I felt the same when I watched it. As I was leaving the theater and the days after, when I was talking to people about it, specifically, I remember talking to Matt about it, and I said, "So is this part of the previous Batman movies? Is it like the same universe? What's going on?" And I remember Matt saying that no, it's completely separate. It's its own. It's like a reboot, and I was like, okay, well then I love it. Then I'm glad that it's its own thing. They weren't trying to continue anything.
Yeah, that's what it was with me. I just never questioned it being anything but a reboot, honestly.
Oh, really?
I didn't really follow the news about it. The only real piece of news that I remember reading before it came out was Batman fans being in an uproar about the Tumbler or the Batmobile.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Which I think it's worth mentioning that the high speed chase with the Tumbler on the freeways and then where he goes completely dark and he's jumping from rooftop to rooftop. I thought that whole sequence was just fantastic.
Yeah.
Where he's transporting Rachel.
Yep.
Yeah, and also the scene where he's escaping from Arkham, and he takes the piece from his boot or whatever, and drops it down to signal the bats to come. I just thought that was just, I thought it was just incredible. A really good sequence. So it had sequences like that. It wasn't just this dark, gritty story about about your everyday billionaire who decides to fight crime. It was just this awesome action movie as well. And one of the things that also connected with me to it was the story of him saving Gotham or wanting to save Gotham.
Yeah.
I thought that was just spectacular. Coming from me, like I've lived in Speedway, Indiana for most of my life. For at this point now, probably half my life, I would say, over half my life. But so just having that small community kind of thing and seeing a depiction on the screen of a guy who is just trying to save his community just kind of resonated with me in some small way. I loved it.
Is it supposed to be small? I don't think Gotham is that small.
No.
I know what Matt's trying to say. It's about it's about civic pride.
Civic pride. There you go.
Civic pride and civic responsibility.
Gotcha.
How it falls on individuals to come together. That's
Yeah. Gotham,
I agree.
Yeah, Gotham is to Bruce Wayne what Speedway is to me, or Speedway is to Tiny.
I swear, if you do one of those, I'm not saying I'm Batman, but Batman and I are never in the same room. Stupid jokes. I'm done on the podcast forever. No, you're not in the same room at the same time because he's a fictional character and you're an idiot. I hate those so much.
I am wearing a cape right now, but
yeah. All right, well, I need to get my costume sent back.
This was the first time that we got the Batman growl in a movie, and I think the first time he does it is when he's roughing up that suspect. And I think the first time he does it is when he's roughing up that suspect in the alleyway, and he's asking where the drugs are. And then everybody had their impression of Batman after that they could do that. Did it bug people as much back then? I think it really started to bug people with The Dark Knight, but did it
started
bug
with
you
The Dark
guys?
Knight. It didn't bug me. It started with The Dark Knight. And even still, it didn't bug me in The Dark Knight.
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it doesn't bug me either, but
I think
bugs a lot of people.
I think they maybe could have made a different choice as far as that goes. His Batman persona voice could have been something different. I mean, it would have been equally stupid if he had been using like a British accent or something like that. But the growl was just kind of weird. I think the pinnacle of it was Dark Knight Rises when he's, "Where is the trigger? Where is it?"
It's the
that was the pinnacle.
I don't so much mind when he shouts it and the camera shakes and you're supposed to fear him the way the villains are supposed to fear him. Mm-hmm. But when he's like, "Out of breath, And he's got a little bit attitude. That actually sounded like Sylvester Stallone in every movie.
A little bit.
It kind of did, yeah.
I think the thing with him, with that is that you mentioned the pinnacle of it being in Dark Knight Rises. I think that the big part that people had a problem with was in The Dark Knight when he's talking to Lucius. Yeah. And it's just the two of them with the big spy thing.
Yeah.
And he's like, he's using the voice, and it's like people get in an uproar like, oh, Lucius knows that he's Bruce Wayne. Like, why? And then I reconcile that with just saying he's in a character.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and then they talk about when in The Dark Knight Rises when he says, "So that's what that feels like." He's talking to himself. But again, I agree. We're spending too much time on this because it really doesn't bother me that much. I'm just trying to figure out why it bothers other people so much.
Yeah.
Well, it is a popular aspect of the film that a lot of people have talked about. So
right,
it's relevant.
Yeah.
Relevant.
Relevant. One of my big things that I had trouble getting over, and make no mistake, I love this movie, and so I'm kind of just trying to play the devil's advocate here for us to have something to talk about. One of the things that bothered me most after leaving the movie was when he tells Ra's al Ghul, as he pronounces it, though it's Ra's al Ghul otherwise.
Right.
When he says, "I won't kill you, but I don't have to save you," that's a thin line there, isn't it?
It's a bit of a loophole, yeah.
Right. I mean, that's a thin line. I don't know.
Yeah, I remember thinking that when I rewatched it. Last time I rewatched it, was that he has a strict moral code not to kill anyone, but he still kind of killed him.
Yeah. Right, but I don't have to save you. You kinda. That's kind of what you're doing here.
Yeah.
I mean, plus he also kind of put him in that situation. You know? He beat him up and then blew up the back of the train, and he's like, "I'm going to leave you here." Sucks to be you.
And plus, like in the next film, in Dark Knight, he, in the climax of that film, the Joker falls off the side of the building, and he makes an effort to save him.
Right.
So that is a good point. Maybe that's just part of his evolution as Batman.
Yeah.
Sure. So maybe he regretted it.
Right. One thing I kind of wanted to mention about this trilogy, but I think it's also, it starts with Batman Begins, obviously, but I think it's also indicative of, or it's something that Nolan has done in a lot of his films. Maybe this isn't the right time to bring it up, but I can't think of a better time. His female characters, especially the character of Rachel in this trilogy, they seem to be very, very one-note characters that don't...
I agree.
Like, the character of Rachel exists solely as a love interest for Bruce Wayne throughout the films, and she doesn't really serve, especially in Dark Knight. She serves almost no purpose other than just as something the other characters work off of, basically. She has no depth whatsoever. She's very shallow, not an interesting character. And I think a lot of his female characters are that. I mean, like even the female characters in Inception were just, they didn't have any. They had a very simple role. They weren't deep at all. I'm not saying he's sexist.
The response to that is Catwoman. She's pretty awesome.
Absolutely, that's the exception.
And Anne Hathaway is pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's the exception.
And Talia al Ghul. Well, Talia al Ghul is not so much a woman as just a villain figure.
Right.
But Catwoman is very much a woman, and she's pretty awesome. I'll give you Ellen Page in Inception though. She's
I was running through a mental list of all the female characters, and like I think Mike, I think you mentioned in a previous podcast about Ellen Page, saying that Ellen Page in Inception, her character might as well have been called Exposition.
Yeah. Basil Expositions.
Totally. But I just thought it was a little bit unfortunate that, I don't know, she wasn't. First of all, I'm not a Katie Holmes fan. I don't think she's not a good actress. I don't think most people would argue that she is, but I did like Maggie Gyllenhaal better in the second one, but it was still just kind of almost an unfortunate character that I think is kind of glossed over when people talk about this trilogy. They kind of forget the fact that was kind of a dumb character. I mean, she wasn't not important. You know, she had some importance, some relevance in the trilogy, but just not real great.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I agree. And Rachel wasn't in the comics or anything like that.
Right.
And I mean, I agree. She was just. It's interesting how this also goes to his propensity or his what's the word I'm looking for?
His penchant.
His penchant for creating women characters whose wives have suffered greatly or died or loved ones have died. Because I mean,
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, Memento, Inception, Dark Knight, Prestige.
Wow, that's a good point. I never thought about that.
Yeah, they all have female characters who die. And are caused to be they're kind of the catalyst of a main male character's thing. Like I remember it was a funny anecdote when Inception came out, and they talked about how like in Inception they have Mal's Cobb's wife and she's dead, and like people were saying like, okay, at this point I kind of think maybe Christopher Nolan's wife should kind of be giving him a second look or kind of keep an eye on herself.
That's funny.
They're right. He should. She should.
Cool.
Do we have favorite scenes? What are your favorite scenes
from Batman Begins?
Batman Begins, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think I already said mine. The bat thing and. Those are more stylistic scenes and the chase, but that's pretty much. I think that'd pretty much cover it. How about you guys?
Go ahead, Mike.
I love the first. I love when he says I'm Batman. I love the beginning when he jumps on top of the limo. That whole sequence where they're frightened. That's exactly the tone that Nolan intended and that Batman intends. And I just love that. Again, it goes back to I love a little bit of horror. I love a little bit of terror, and I think that's very in the same ilk as a horror movie. That scene,
yeah,
and I appreciate that.
Okay, I guess I would kind of go with an amalgam of scenes where Bruce Wayne and Ra's al Ghul are kind of training towards the beginning of the film when they're training still in China. Yeah. I kind of like when they have that sword fight on the ice and the subsequent scene around the campfire. That stuff I thought was just setting the tone for the whole trilogy essentially. I think back to that sometimes, and from that movie specifically, from Batman Begins, I think that's probably my favorite part.
Yeah. I agree.
It's good.
Also worth mentioning, Ra's al Ghul's wife, dead.
Yeah.
Also dead.
Jeez. Yeah. And later on his daughter.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, cool.
Should we move on?
Sure.
Let's do it.
Tiny, how about you?
Like you said, we've talked about Inception and Dark Knight Rises and stuff. But I think another noteworthy experience I had with Nolan in the theater was actually Batman Begins. I didn't necessarily boycott that movie, but I just didn't even, I don't know, it wasn't even on my radar, that first Nolan Batman movie. I didn't really care about it. Didn't know anything about it.
Well, sorry to interrupt. I know this is your segment.
No, it's cool.
But I was significantly more concerned with Star Wars Episode 3 that summer.
Really.
You know, so it was like Star Wars. Oh yeah, there's a Batman movie.
Yeah, that's probably what it was with me too. But yeah, it wasn't on my radar at all. I thought it was actually a continuation of the Schumacher movies and stuff. Like I just didn't pay attention to it. It wasn't really something that was on my radar. And so I actually saw it at like a second chance theater or something. So it was like it was out of theaters basically, and it had been out of theaters for a month probably, and it was just at this this last chance theater or whatever. And I saw it with a girlfriend as well, and she had seen it. She's like, "Yeah, it's really good." I was like, "All right, yeah, we can watch it." And I watched it, sat down, watched it, really liked it, loved it. And then at the end, it said directed by Christopher Nolan, and I was like, "What?" That's how off my radar it was. I didn't even know that Christopher Nolan had directed it, and I just remember sitting there thinking, like, this guy's going to be huge, because I had watched Memento and loved it, and I had watched Insomnia and thought it was pretty good, and then he comes out of nowhere and makes this huge blockbuster, big budget movie, and it's fantastic. I was like, this guy is he's so versatile. This guy's going to go places. And I think that was the movie that kind of solidified that opinion for me.
That's awesome. I'm jealous that you guys got in so early, because I surely saw Chris Nolan's name in the credits and thought absolutely nothing of it. In fact, I think that's how you sold Memento to me, Matt.
Yeah.
This is the guy who did Batman Begins.
Right.
Yeah, and having said that, or since you brought up Memento again, I think just for crediting reasons, I think the first time I saw Memento, I'm almost positive that I borrowed your DVD, Matt.
Probably.
That's the first time I ever saw it. So
I think that was one of those things where I feel like you introduced me to Fight Club, and in return, I introduced you to Memento, which
better friend.
I don't know.
We should duke it out like in Fight Club.
Yeah.
Actually, calls back to us talking about how like Tiny's just a part of my subconscious.
Oh yeah, up in our earlier episodes. That's right.
Call back.
Awesome.
All right. So up next is Insomnia. This is a bit of an interesting departure from the rest of Nolan's filmography in that he didn't write it or anything. He just directed it. Mm-hmm. And I just recently watched it, and it was okay. The lack of his wordsmithery, if that's a thing, was
you just made it. You just coined it.
Coined by Obsessive. You're now. Anytime anyone uses it, they're gonna have to pay me, and this podcast is going places. But it. The lack of his writing was felt in it, for me at least. Yeah. What did you guys think of it?
Go ahead, Tiny.
Okay. I had seen it probably 4 times.
Oh wow!
And I watched it recently as a refresher, and I had always kind of held it in the regard that it's just kind of meh, just an okay movie. I will say, and maybe my Christopher Nolan bias plays into this, but I liked it a lot more watching it this time. I don't think I had watched it since Inception and The Dark Knight Rises came out. I kind of see Nolan's signature in it now, even in some of the simple stuff, like the way that the little chase scene in Insomnia is filmed, where Al Pacino and Robin Williams are running across those logs that are just floating in the bay. That's how they transport them, I guess. And they're kind of running across that. It just kind of had a bit of a Christopher Nolan feel to it. I guess I just detected a little more of a Christopher Nolan feel on this watch through than I had in the past.
Interesting. Yeah, you mentioned noticing some of Nolan's signature stuff. I noticed that too, that because the movie's about a detective who goes to Alaska, where it's just daylight around the clock, and he's investigating this murder of this young girl, and he's played by Al Pacino. It's just a really...
The young girl is played by Al Pacino?
yeah, it's the role of a lifetime.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. It's an interesting movie. The plot is interesting. I'll give it that. I'm not completely discrediting the plot. It's just that with Nolan's signatures as a director were present, but it was just not his signatures as a storyteller weren't there, and that kind of made me miss something.
I'll agree with that. That's a good point.
Okay, thank you. But
it's unfortunate, though, isn't it, that we have to have his writing? Is that perhaps a slight to Chris Nolan that he does not play well with others? Do you know what I mean? There are several.
Right, I get what you're
saying. I wouldn't say that, and this might sound like backtracking, and I don't mean it to, but I don't think it's a bad movie. Like I said, it's an interesting plot, and I enjoyed it for what it was, but I don't think I think that it speaks more to an expectation that Nolan's past and at the time future work gives me, because I've experienced Nolan as a director / writer, and it's that's him firing on all cylinders. This is him working in tandem with someone else. Someone else's writing, and I'm sure that he took a pass at the script, but there was still just something missing from traditional Nolan fare. Now, if I had seen this without any bias toward Nolan or any expectations toward Nolan, I may have actually liked it a little more because I wouldn't have that expectation. So I just want to make it clear, I'm not saying that it's a low quality film. I'm just saying that it's in the pantheon of Nolan's entire career. It's just not, doesn't really cut it for me. It seems like he's a little held back in it.
And I wouldn't go so far as to say he doesn't play well with others. And the reason I wouldn't say that is because this is really the only example that we have.
Well,
and if maybe if he was teamed up with a great writer, maybe if he was, I don't know, if he was teamed, I would love to see him shoot an Andrew Kevin Walker script. That would be huge, I think. I think it would go well with his style. And, maybe if we get something like that, it would be great. I don't think I'd make that judgment on this one, though.
Well, that's kind of, what I'm saying is I think we kind of have to look at it apart from the fact that he didn't write it, and kind of just take it for what it is. I see what you're saying about the expectations, but like the Batman movies, David Goyer, had his thumbprints all over it, fingerprints all over those movies. You know what I mean? Who wrote the stories, and I'm sure DC and Warner Brothers had a lot to say about those movies. So for me, I don't know that the movie. I don't want to say it's not a great Chris Nolan movie because he didn't write it. For me, I just think it's not that great of a movie. I don't want to say I wish he didn't do it, but he's above it.
Just real quick about, I agree with you, but bringing up David S. Goyer, I feel like that's not a fair comparison, because while his fingerprints are on the Dark Knight trilogy, or at least Batman Begins, it's also Nolan's work, obviously. Like I think I mentioned in the Man of Steel episode that I read the first draft of Batman Begins. It was the first draft it was before Nolan worked it out. It was basically David Goyer's script, and it's
his
a vastly
story.
It's a vastly different script. It's not, it doesn't have that Nolan touch.
Gotcha.
And the memory of that lessened the blow of how awful I thought Man of Steel was, because it was as soon as I saw it was written solely by David Goyer, I was like, okay, well that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, and going back to seeing Nolan's signatures in Insomnia, I forgot to mention that one of the things that I noticed that is very Nolan-esque is that Al Pacino's character is he can't sleep throughout the movie, and there's like flashes of what he's thinking about, and like it's very quick kind of flashes to the murder he's investigating, to some of the other darker kind of things in his past. And it very much reminds me of like in Memento, there was like flashes of Sammy Jenkins and little bits of memories here and there, and it's that same kind of style. And also in a little bit in I think it was The Dark Knight that they had those flashes.
That's a good point.
Yeah, that's funny.
One of the things I really like about the movie is the performances. Actually, I think especially, obviously, it's mostly carried by Al Pacino's character. It's almost a noir piece in that sense. But Al Pacino's pretty good in it. Obviously, he's not as great as when he played Michael Corleone or when he was in Dog Day Afternoon. He still gives a good performance.
Right.
I think he's great in that character.
He does. He spends a little bit of time roughing up a suspect.
He does.
That suspect in particular is Robin Williams. What about him?
Oh, yeah. Robin Williams is great. I think he toed the line very well between playing just kind of a guy you could kind of sympathize with and someone who's a full-blown serial killer.
Yeah.
Because he's not a serial killer. He's a bit of a sociopath because, he kills this girl and he just sees it like, well, it's just an accident. He doesn't have any remorse about it. But he's not...
Right.
He's not... You don't necessarily think he's a full-on crazy person. Like a Ted Bundy type thing.
Right.
He made a really good performance, especially with his personal conversations with Al Pacino. Those were some really good back and forths between some seasoned professionals.
Yeah.
It was the period in Robin Williams' career when he was doing the serious thing, of which I wish there was more.
Me too.
I was just going to say that this and 1 Hour Photo are really good examples of his. Maybe the only examples of his doing darker turns.
And Patch Adams was like him dipping his toes in the water.
Right.
Well,
and
these don't forget the movie Awakenings from the 90s. I think that was his first Oscar nomination.
Oh, yeah. And Good Will Hunting.
Yeah.
Right.
We're getting all over the place.
What's Awakenings real quick? It sounds familiar, but I can't place it.
Awakenings was a film from, I think, 1990 or 91, and it takes place in the 1970s or 69 or something like that. And Robin Williams plays a doctor in a mental institution, and he has a group of patients who were afflicted with encephalitis. And these people were basically just shut down. They didn't speak, and basically they were just vegetables. And this doctor, played by Robin Williams, kind of runs tests on them and finds that their brains aren't shut down and they can still react to things.
Oh, wow. And
he tries out this drug on them, and it actually cures their affliction. And he literally wakes these people up. And, I mean, they were vegetables, and he just basically wakes them up. But unfortunately, we find out that the drug is only a temporary fix, and that no matter how much more you give them, it eventually wears off, and these people slowly slip back into their vegetative states.
Oh, wow.
And it's a really great movie. Robert De Niro plays the main patient that he brings back, and it's just a great movie. I think it's actually a better performance on Robin Williams' part than Good Will Hunting.
Oh, wow.
We're also forgetting Dead Poet Society. I guess I was just talking about the resurgence of his serious side.
Yeah. And it's more his foray into the darker, disturbed kind of roles.
Sure. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. I'll have to check out Awakenings, but the performances in Insomnia, I feel like I agree. They're both Robin Williams and Al Pacino are great, and Al Pacino particularly. I don't know if it's indicative of the time that the movie was filmed, like the time in his career, but I just associate him with this kind of over the top kind of hoo-ah kind of guy, and he's very subdued in this, and it's a good performance.
It is, but he's playing tired.
Yeah,
I feel like he's tired in the movie, or he seems tired, and at first you're like, well, man, that's Al Pacino's tired, but he's playing tired.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, by the end, he looks absolutely exhausted.
Yeah. He's good. He's good in it.
Yeah. So, overall, it's... I don't know. I felt like it's a good movie. It's a little hampered by Nolan's other movies. It's because...
It's overshadowed.
Better, worse, or the same in quality as Following?
I would say better.
I would say...
on pretty much all accounts.
Huh.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. I would say I like Following better just because of the plotting, the intricacies of the plot and the deception and the nonlinear storytelling.
I would say I had a similar reaction to both, which is I really just want to watch Memento again.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Did you? I think when I had watched it in the past, I had the memory that Al Pacino and his partner, played by Martin Donovan, I had the memory for some reason that they were federal agents or FBI, but they're not. They're LAPD detectives,
right?
Which I find it very strange. Like, why would the LAPD loan out 2 of their detectives to fly up to Alaska to help out with this case? It just seems weird that the FBI wouldn't be involved.
Did they explain
Maybe
that
they're
at
the
all?
best closest.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
You know, maybe Washington State's not getting it done.
Right.
So they got to send these guys.
I think it's and I think it's just strange to me. It's partly explained by the fact that the sheriff of the town, I think it's called Night Mute.
Yeah.
The sheriff was clearly like old buddies with Al Pacino's character. And some of the guys at the LAPD were like old friends of his. Still, that doesn't seem like enough for official channels to like loan out 2 of their detectives. Maybe it's explained in the book, but it just seems weird to me. It's I think it would have made more sense for them to be like FBI agents.
Right.
It didn't like kill the film or anything. I mean, it didn't make it unwatchable. It was just weird, kind of a strange aspect.
I guess I never thought of it.
Yeah, it's part of my criminal justice mind.
Yeah, that's true. And you say it's. I don't think it's. I may be wrong, but I don't think it's based on a book. I think it's based on a Norwegian movie.
Oh, is it?
I think so, and that may be part of that. Maybe it's something they just tried to adapt for the American thing, and they just kind of overlooked it. I guess I don't know.
Either way, yeah. Like I said, just a strange aspect, I guess.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, yeah. Well, I think that about covers Insomnia. Yeah.
I agree.
Yep.
All right. Any parting thoughts on it?
No, I think we covered it.
None whatsoever. And I guess that's very telling.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah. I guess we should move on to what's this next movie? It's
Breaking Bad. Breaking Bad. Batman Begins. Batman Begins.
Yes, small little independent film. I think.
I don't know that I've seen it. Is it on Netflix? It's the prequel to Batman, 1989.
Oh yes, that's right.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, so that's good. That's good.
Yep.
Yeah, and next I wanted to talk about like where you guys see Nolan going forward after he's finished the Dark Knight trilogy. He's working on Interstellar now. I want to get your guys' thoughts on where he's going as a director. Where do you see him going from here?
Okay. I'm glad that you say as a director and you make that qualification, because I was going to say we all know that he's a producer, you know, working with Warner Brothers, and he's a producer on the Superman movies to come. And I assume all of the Justice League stuff coming up.
I actually don't think so.
Okay.
Is
he involved in Superman versus Batman?
I don't think so. I think that he just did Honestly, part of me thinks that they just got him for Man of Steel just to get his name. But
I think so. It didn't feel very much like him.
No.
Okay. Well, because that's what I was going to talk about. So that's kind of a breath of fresh air.
Right. Because I think the part of the reason why they got Ben Affleck is to get him as producer and all that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So where do you see Christopher Nolan's future as a filmmaker, Mike?
Oh, the sky's the limit. I mean, we know Interstellar is coming out. I know very little about Interstellar, and I'm kind of keeping it that way.
Mm-hmm. And I think really, Nolan's kind of keeping it that way as well.
Well, sure, of course, he does that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Again, as the superhero fan, my favorite work of his is the Batman stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So while I'm excited to see what he'll do in the future and to see him do original work, I'm gonna miss his fingers all over my favorite superheroes. I'll rather than looking forward to what he is going to do, I'll just dream of the Spider-Man movie directed by Chris Nolan.
Oh.
You know what I mean?
Interesting. Okay, cool. I see what you're saying. That makes sense.
Yeah.
His breakout movie, I would say, at least in the neo-noir sort of indie movie arena. Right. So to get things started off, I think we already covered this a little bit, but what was your guys' first experience with Memento?
Well, my first experience, if you don't mind me going first, Tiny.
No, go ahead.
Was seeing it with you right by my side, Matt.
Oh.
And we had a film class and we saw it in the film class, and I was just blown away. And we talked about it afterwards, and my brain was just mush after. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was just so much to go through and so much to talk about that I just had to watch it again. I feel like that weekend I went out and bought the DVD, watched it again, waited a few hours, and then I watched it. Like there's the special feature on the DVD where you can watch it chronologically.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? And I did that as well, and just went over and over again. It was good. It was a good first viewing experience to see it in that big auditorium. And to just, your introduction was this is the Batman Begins guy. Enjoy this.
Right. And I'm sure I built it up like this is one of my favorite movies of all time, so you need to love this movie.
Yeah, and I was like, is that the guy from The Time Machine?
Nice.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I loved seeing it in the theater. I was floored by that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even remember any of the lecture that we had for that.
What was the point of watching that movie? I mean, they always had a point. They always had the.
Yeah.
Was it? Were they just talking about?
I think he was talking about like editing.
Editing. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Probably.
Why was this in? Is it part of it was in sepia, right? All the
right.
Yeah, something like
sepia. That. And I think we were talking about why is this stuff in sepia? Why is this stuff in color?
Right.
And then interestingly, how the character evolves over the time, but only because we get the evolution of the character.
Right.
So
yeah.
It was cool.
It's a great movie. Tiny, how about you? What was your? I think you already mentioned that you borrowed my DVD, but what was your initial reaction to the movie? I should say.
I was equally as shocked by it. It was the first time that Chris Nolan ever reached into my brain and flipped it upside down and punched it, and then put it back in there. It was
like it was roughing up a suspect.
So I was blown away by it initially. Even as a 15, 16-year-old, I was blown away by it. I had heard from so many people that it was so good, and I finally just broke down and borrowed it from you. And I think I went out and bought it within a month or two as well, and I've probably watched it at least 7 or 8 times since.
Did you buy the DVD
absolutely.
that looks like a case file?
I don't have. I used to have that one, but I think I lost it when I went to college or something, and I repurchased it, and they didn't have any more Like that special one wasn't in print anymore or something like that. It's like, yeah.
I love that DVD packaging.
Yeah, so do I.
Yeah.
It even comes with a paper clip.
The funny thing about that is, at the time I was working at Blockbuster, or later I was working at Blockbuster. In any case, I think I loaned it to Tiny, and then I think in the exchange of getting it back, I went to his house to get it back, and I think the paperclip like fell out or something. Mm-hmm. So I didn't have it anymore, and I was kind of bummed because I was like, "Oh, it's a nice little, cool little thing to put on there." So I just went to Blockbuster, and this is when they had the boxes out covering the thing. So I just took the paperclip from one of theirs. And that led to the downfall of Blockbusters across the nation.
Single-handedly bankrupted Blockbuster.
I did.
Blockbuster's going to get their legal department after you.
Yeah, yeah. And now I'm going to be on the run.
We're losing our paper clips. We don't make any money anymore. Our pets' heads are falling off.
Nice.
Well done.
But yeah, for those who haven't seen Memento, it's just an incredibly well done movie. It stars Guy Pearce as a man who, following his wife is killed, and in the process, his head is damaged to where he doesn't have short-term memory. Mm-hmm. So he has all of these these notes and these Polaroids of things that he needs to remember as he hunts his wife's killer, and the big and tattoos. Yeah, for the big clues, he has tattoos. John G. raped and killed my wife. Mm-hmm. Find him and kill him. So basically, the entire movie is him hunting his wife's killer. But the thing that Nolan does to get us into his frame of mind is the movie is played in reverse. Mm-hmm. The first scene is last. The last scene is first. That's an oversimplification of the format, but for all intents and purposes, that's what it is. And it just works incredibly well because you sympathize with Leonard, and you feel his plight as you don't know what's going on, and you see him struggle with relearning this information and questioning the people around him, their motivations, their like he doesn't know who to trust, and it's just it gets into, as Tiny said, it gets into your brain, flips it over, punches it, and gets out. It's just a spectacular movie.
I wrote a song shortly after. I was in a band for several years.
Mm-hmm.
And
Thank you, Jade.
Thank you, Jade. Thank you. Thanks for the name drop. After I watched Memento, I wrote a song about like being a con man, and not that Leonard, Guy Pearce's character, was a con man, but and I wrote about writing the facts on my right wrist because I'm left-handed in more ways than one. I don't even know exactly what that means, but I like it intrigued me to tattoo stuff on yourself to remember things. And so I just wrote this song about this guy who is left-handed, and I felt like at the time like left-handed meant like you rip people off all the time. I don't know why I thought that.
That's interesting because you saw it. This was freshman year of college, and I'm left-handed.
You are?
I am.
Oh,
yeah.
Things have changed between us. I did not know this.
Interesting.
Maybe I was writing about you.
Yeah, I was like, that's why I said I kind of wish that it was written about
the song goes, and he slept there 2 feet from my own bed. Something like that.
Boy, do I feel like the third wheel tonight.
Right. You have a friend named Tiny. He is in Indianapolis.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But the cast is phenomenal for Memento. It's just, I mean, Guy Pearce, I hope that Guy Pearce and Christopher Nolan work together again, because that meld of performer and director was amazing. Mm-hmm. And there's a particular scene in the movie where Leonard is he pays a prostitute or an escort or what have you to recreate the events of the night that his wife died. Mm-hmm.
the last memory he has of his wife.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, because it's the last memory before he ceased to have memories. So and it's just strange because after it happens and all that, because she doesn't understand what's going on, he goes and he burns all of his former wife's possessions. Mm-hmm. And it's just the atmosphere of the scene. It's dark, and he's just standing just in, I think it's a parking lot with a garbage fire. He's just tossing these things in there, and he says something to the effect of,
probably tried this before. Probably burned truckloads of your stuff. Can't remember to forget you.
It's just a really well executed scene. It's just there's this heartfelt, like the music plays, and it's just a very nice. It's a good character moment, I should say, because it's a good development of his character. It always stuck with me.
Interesting. I wanted to ask you guys, since we're talking about it, do you guys feel that if the film had not had the aspect of being told in reverse, if you will, which again is a bit of an oversimplification, but if it didn't have, I don't want to call it a gimmick, but if it didn't have that aspect to it, do you think it would have been do you think it would be such a memorable film, or do you think it would be held in such high esteem if it was just a straightforward noir mystery with the same aspect of having, the memory loss thing, which is also kind of again, that's definitely not a gimmick, but it's a unique aspect of the film. But do you think without the reversal or the way they tell the story, do you think it would still be as memorable of a film?
Well, first of all, I love that you refer to it as a memorable film.
Jeez,
if it's unintentional, but I love it. But I'll yield the floor to Mike, because he said you've watched the chronological version. I can't remember if I did or.
And it's been so long since I watched it. But still, the whole time, the whole time I was watching the chronological version, I'm connecting it to the one that is reverse chronological, right? So I'm really only making connections. So to answer your question, Tiny, I would say no. In fact, considering the publicity that his older movies received, I don't even know that this movie would have the net of this movie would have been cast as wide, or even been made, were it not for the gimmick, I guess, for want of a better phrase. But
interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would say no. Definitely not as memorable, but possibly not even made.
Okay.
I would say that it's for lack of a better word, it is slightly gimmicky, but it also not so. It's not.
Well, the word gimmick has a negative connotation to it, but
it does.
That's not.
It does.
Memento is definitely not that. You couldn't. I don't think you could even make the argument that it's a gimmick. Really, it needs its own term. Yeah,
it is a stylistic choice by Nolan that serves the story almost as much as anything else.
Right.
It's very integral to the story he's telling, because when you watch it chronologically, early on in the movie, I mean, spoiler alert, you find out, I'll keep it vague, but you find out characters' intentions by the end of the movie as we see it, or beginning of the movie as chronologically as we see it. So to watch it chronologically, I mean, obviously they'd have to make some script changes or whatever if they were never going to do the reverse editing. But you see the intentions from the start, and it would kind of cheapen the experience. Not that it wouldn't still be an engaging movie, but it still would lose something in that translation because it's so integral to the story that is being told.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's the reason why I think it's so important to the film is that the character of Leonard, he lives his life essentially in scenes. That's how he lives his life. It's scene after scene after scene. That's how he lives his life, and that's how movies are. Movies are a collection of scenes, and because they have to be, you couldn't have, if you told a movie in real time, it would be 10 hours long, or 3 days long. So that's how films are naturally. They have to be that way. So you couldn't really capture the aspect of how Leonard lives his life through traditional storytelling. It had to have that different aspect to it. It had to have that style choice, as you called it, Matt. Mm-hmm. So it's not a gimmick for that. It is a way. It was the perfect way to illustrate how the character of Leonard lives his life. That was a perfect way to demonstrate it. You couldn't do it through traditional storytelling. Right. Yeah. Cool.
That's good.
Anything else about Memento, or should we move on to Insomnia?
I say move on.
I say move on too.
All right. Tiny, what about you? Where do you see Christopher Nolan's future as a filmmaker?
Mike said that the sky is the limit, and I completely agree. He's one of the, like I said, I think he's literally important to the film industry. Mm-hmm. I think the sky is the limit, but I don't think he needs to reach for the sky on every single film. That's kind of how I feel about it, because since Batman Begins, everything he's made has been a pretty big budget, huge blockbuster.
True.
The Prestige maybe not, but it was still a pretty big movie.
Yeah.
And so I think he's continuing that with Interstellar. It's probably going to be a pretty big release, but I honestly I wouldn't mind him going back to doing something like Memento again, or Insomnia, kind of a lower budget, lower scale, just kind of a straightforward movie. Just develop some characters, just something kind of simple again, just to see that side of him again. I have no problem if he makes another 10 Inceptions, 10 more huge budget movies that make $500 million. I have no problem with that, but I just think it would be an interesting exercise as a filmmaker to see him do that.
Interesting. Yeah, I agree with that. I just want to kind of bust your balls for a second, but I thought it was funny that you referenced Memento. You said Memento and what phrase is it?
Straightforward.
Yeah, that's not very accurate.
Yeah, but I mean, with Nolan,
I think you know what I meant.
Like, with Nolan, nothing is really that straightforward.
True.
So first up is Christopher Nolan's debut movie, which is Following, a little independent movie. A little 70-minute independent movie about a man who likes to follow people.
It was really short.
It was very short. And Mike, you just recently watched it for like the first time, right?
I did. I watched it, 4 days ago, in terms of like when we recorded this podcast. So,
right,
a week ago or so.
Okay. What did you think of it?
I liked it a lot. I was kind of busy, so like I put it on, and so lame. I kind of like worked out while I was watching it, and kind of had my eye on it, and then I sat down on the computer, and then finally got into it a little more as it went on. But I was a little thrown. I kind of had to pause and look to see like who these three guys were that kind of looked the same. And it wasn't until I, read up on it and realized they were the same guy. But I liked it. I enjoyed it.
Nice.
Cool. I
liked it quite a bit, too. It's kind of my go-to thing whenever I tell people about it is that you can see the inner workings of Nolan's like genius, or the early parts of his brilliance.
Yeah, exactly.
In terms of plotting and everything, and it's interesting to note that this was the first. This is one of only two of his movies that are actual, just completely original to him. because like Memento is based on a story that his brother wrote. The Prestige is based on a book, and
did he write Inception by himself?
He did.
Okay,
he did.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, and it's just it was a good flick. It was a good flick and a good. It's always fun to watch filmmakers in their early days when they're still kind of rough around the edges. It kind of reminds me of Darren Aronofsky's Pi,
which I don't like. This is far superior to Pi. In my opinion.
Okay.
I'm either or on it. I've only seen Pi once.
Yeah, I haven't seen that in so long.
But yeah, Tiny, what did you think of Following?
I liked it as well. I think it's a movie that's kind of, once you get past the feel of it, I think it's because you can tell that it's such a super low budget movie. Once you get into it and you get past that feeling, you really start, you get into it and you start connecting with the characters and thinking about it and all that stuff. It's a cool movie, and it's definitely something that could have, I think it would have been vastly improved by having a big budget or having more of a budget.
Right.
And not just, I like the choice of making it black and white. That's not what I mean. It's just, it's just the way that it feels like, the director, the filmmakers like put it, they had to film it in their own apartments and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I think it would have been an even better film with a budget. But I liked it. I thought the performances were pretty good too.
Me too.
Yeah, that I think is what stood out to me. Unknowns as far as my knowledge of movies. I didn't know. I knew who nobody was in this movie, and I had to say I was impressed with the performances, specifically the thief, the burglar.
Mm-hmm.
I thought he was particularly good.
He was really good.
He was really good as a kind of just a sketchy guy.
Mm-hmm. Sketchy guy with charisma.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely
Charming, yeah.
Yeah. He was a great criminal.
Absolutely.
like a con man, yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
I thought I was really impressed by the fact that a first time filmmaker, at least a full budget film and everything, he chose to make it like a non-linear story. He interspersed different timelines throughout each other. It wasn't just a straightforward linear movie. That's a very bold choice to make with a low budget film, and it's very bold to make as a first time filmmaker. You just don't expect to see something like that. And I think that's one of the more impressive parts of the movie is how he edited it together.
Yeah. It leaves you guessing. You see the bruises on his face, and you're suspecting that he got roughed up, but you're not sure how it happens or when it happens, and you're kind of waiting to see.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that I feel like it was a. I feel like it was like kind of a film school kind of thing. I don't know if it is or not, but it felt like a very like he was learning himself. Nolan was learning his style, and obviously nonlinear storytelling is a very big style for him as a filmmaker even today. And it was cool to see him cut his teeth in that. It felt like he was experimenting with a storytelling style that would go on to treat him very well. And I just got a huge kick out of it.
Did you guys see the estimated budget for the movie?
Yeah,
$6,000.
$6,000.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
How did you guys find the movie? Like, how did you guys come about hearing about the movie and subsequently watching it?
Through Matt.
Really?
Through Matt, he said, this is one of his earliest ones. Have you ever seen it? Nope, probably won't. Nope, probably won't. Which I don't know why, because it's so short. It's just a quick watch.
Yeah.
But to be honest, I watched it for this podcast, and you guys said it was on Netflix.
Nice.
So glad I did, though.
I don't remember how I came about it. I know that it was because it was Nolan. It was long after I'd gotten into Nolan. So I think that it may have just been I was seeking it out just to complete my viewing collection of Nolan movies.
Right, and I'm guessing that's how most people found it. The way I found it was actually really cool. One of my uncles, he's a huge movie buff, but he's really like at the time he owned a business, and so he was super busy. He didn't have a lot of time to watch a lot of movies, so whenever he watches something, he really chooses something that's going to be worth his while. And at the time, he was living in Singapore, and he lived there for like 10 years, and so he couldn't get his hands on everything. And a lot of stuff he had to watch, he would buy in bootleg form, like down at the local market and stuff like that.
Huh.
And so that's the first way I saw the movie was when I was visiting him. Sometimes I would go like 2-3 years without seeing him. So we would usually talk about movies when we saw each other, and it was always a really great discussion. And he just kind of pulled out this generic. It wasn't even a generic CD case. It was just like one of those clear plastic CD cases. It wasn't even a DVD case. And he had this DVD of Following that he had bought for like 3 yuan, which is I think that's the Singaporean currency. So he bought it for like essentially like 50 cents or something like that. And he was like, yeah, the Christopher Nolan, the guy who made the Memento movie. I was like, yeah, it's an awesome movie. I love it. He's like, well, this is his very first movie he made in England. And I was like, whoa, that sounds awesome. And I borrowed it from him for like a year until I saw him again. And that's the first time I saw the movie. And it was just a kind of a cool little thing to share it with my uncle that way, who I didn't get to see very often.
Oh, wow. Cool. That's awesome. I never heard that story.
Yeah.
That's cool.
It's kind of cool.
Nice.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Not that any of us here at the Obsessive Viewer condone bootlegging or piracy of any kind.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Boo. Hiss. Never.
Never.
I watched it on Netflix that my parents pay for.
Nice.
Awesome.
Yeah, so it's a great movie, and it's definitely it's got a bunch of elements that will that's just it's really well done. I would say, especially for what it is. It's this independent movie, like we said, $6,000.
Right.
It's just it's really clever. It's clever, and that's one of the big takeaways for me with the movie is that it's basically a good introduction to what Nolan will eventually become, this kind of clever storyteller with very intricately plotted and like just nonlinear storytelling at its near finest, because especially for what it is, this independent movie.
Definitely.
Yep.
Agreed.
All right. Memento?
Let's talk about Memento.
All right.
Let's do it.
That's interesting. I'll tell you where I kind of see him headed. Like we said, he's working on Interstellar right now. It's filming. Despite my best efforts, I can't find out where they're filming, and I can't crash the set. But anyway,
they're not filming in space.
Man,
dang it!
All right, well, I got to cancel that lunch with Elon Musk.
I thought.
Thanks for ruining the illusion, Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I thought.
But no, and I mean, with Interstellar, I'm just amped that he's doing a space movie, because I mean, ever since the zero G hallway fight with Joseph Gordon-Levitt in Inception, I was like, he needs to make a space movie like right now.
To reference earlier in the podcast, that was when I said we laughed at scenes in Inception, my friend and I, when we saw it. That was the scene that was just so awesome. The only emotion we could muster was laughter.
Oh yeah,
like giddy
Agreed.
with excitement after that scene.
Right. Yeah. So the thing I find interesting about Interstellar is, and I'll talk about it later, and more in depth later. But the thing I find interesting is that they set the release date early in the spring, but they set the release date this spring. But the release date is November of next year, which I thought was interesting, and I feel like maybe this is just me reaching for something, but I'm hoping that that's supposed to be indicative of at least Nolan trying to shift his stature as a filmmaker from the summer blockbuster to maybe a legitimate Oscar-worthy award season guy.
Right. I would agree with you, and I think he deserves to be an Oscar guy. In fact, when I stopped taking the Oscars seriously was when he wasn't even nominated for Dark Knight. That's another conversation altogether.
Right.
But you got to remember that Thanksgiving weekend in November is pretty freaking blockbuster. I mean, this year, like every year, we get a Twilight. We got a Twilight movie. This year is a Hunger Games. It's becoming pretty big as well.
That's true. And is it
good point?
Is it going to be released on Thanksgiving weekend?
No, I don't
know
that. I just assume if you have a movie opening in November, it's that kind of, especially a movie called Interstellar with the cast that it has.
Yeah,
it sounds like a Thanksgiving weekend movie.
Okay,
could be.
Yeah, I'm still going to hold out hope that he's going to it's going to be a push for award season because I love sci-fi movies, and I just want a sci-fi movie that will be considered for awards, and maybe Gravity will be that actually. But I hope that he becomes. He has, not that there's anything wrong with directing blockbusters or anything. I just feel like he has so much more talent than that. And that's evident in all of his Batman movies, and just the everything about his style, and he's. You
say he has more talent than blockbusters?
I say that he is worthy of shifting to awards caliber work. I
agree, but I think the great thing about Nolan is his ability to blend them, and I think that's why we love him. Because they are huge blockbuster movies that we think are deserving of award quality. And a lot of people do. I mean, when he was snubbed at the Oscars, a lot of people cried foul. I think that's the awesome balance. So I don't care when he releases his movies. I think they're going to be awesome. And I think eventually he will be considered for the major awards.
I hope so. But in as a quick addendum to that or whatever, when you say that he's a perfect blend of it, I can't necessarily fully agree with you because I love Inception, and I'll talk about that when we discuss it. But I love Inception to death. But we've mentioned this before. But it was made for a blockbuster audience. It was made for a summer audience, but the plot was
and we'll talk about that later.
It was too complex for a blockbuster audience, and because of that, the film suffered slightly. We'll talk about that more in depth when we talk about Inception, but I feel like
Dark Knight suffer at all? I mean, I think Dark Knight is a pretty near-perfect movie.
I absolutely agree. Oh, it's absolutely a near-perfect movie, but it didn't have the intricate plot, or it didn't have the intricacies of
barely
Inception.
Any plot, but that's
it didn't have the intricate world.
Yeah,
the whole new universe essentially.
Yeah, because half of Inception was explaining Inception.
You're right.
Yeah, so, but any closing thoughts on Nolan? I wanted to mention, and I would hope that he makes a Bond movie.
Oh, awesome! I would love that.
Yeah, I know that he's a huge Bond fan. I just feel like it would be amazing to see him do it. Not that Sam Mendes needs to be dispatched from the franchise at all by any means, because I loved Skyfall, but I hope that he gets a crack at it at some point.
Agreed. Cool.
Yeah. All right. Any parting thoughts on Nolan?
Just looking forward to Interstellar. Can't wait.
Nice. All right, well, let's get cracking on actually talking about his movies individually.
Awesome.
All right. Now, where were we? Hey, it's Matt. Thanks for listening to the Obsessive Viewer podcast. This was our summer 2013 season finale. I realize it's kind of an arbitrary label considering that it's almost the end of September, but we started this podcast on June 21st and felt it was appropriate to kind of gauge each season by the seasons outside, even if they won't align with the movie-going seasons, but whatever. Just want to give, again, thank you everyone for listening and downloading and commenting and everything. It means the world to us because we didn't think anyone would actually listen. And I want to give a special thank you to our friend Greg Lenz, who he pestered me and Tiny for the longest time and tried to convince us to start a podcast, and we finally did. Because he basically forced us to, and it's been great ever since. So thanks a lot, Greg, and I want to also thank Chris Spangle and the entire We Are Libertarians empire for helping us out when we got started. They loaned us some equipment for our first episode, and also Chris let us bend his ear about podcast producing and all that stuff. So thank you very much for that. It was a lot of help, and those guys are really cool. You should check it out. Their podcast is We Are Libertarians. It's a great one. Also, thank you to our friends Anonymous Bill and Doc for the Exposure Express Network. We used some equipment of theirs for an early episode, and that helped us out a lot because we weren't sure if we were going to be able to get an episode out that week, and one of the big things for us has been consistency. I say that while recording this very late on the Friday that this was supposed to be released, so if you're listening to this day one, I apologize for the lateness. We had an editing crisis that maybe I'll talk about on a later podcast where I'm not freaking out over the direness of the situation. But and also, again, I've said it like 4 times, but thank you everyone for listening, and we hope that you keep listening and that you tell all your friends about it. Of course, you can contact us on Twitter at Obsessive Viewer, Obsessive Tiny, and at I Am Mike White. You can like us on Facebook, visit the blog at obsessiveviewer.com. We have a lot of things planned for the future. You can also send us an email at ovpodcast@gmail.com. Yeah, we hope to hear from you guys and hope you guys like listening. We'll be back next week with an all new episode. So, all right. Thanks for listening.